So I have been working in the CSE department and IT department of Guru Nanak Institute of Technology earlier. So now I have been requested to take a guest lecture for you in operating system. So shall we start?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I will be giving you a little introduction of operating system, and then I will go to one of the very important topics of operating system, and there is no question paper without this topic. If you notice, even if you have your internals or your semester, whatever it is, if this portion is included for you, if this portion of the syllabus is included for you, then definitely this question will be there. So, and it is a very basic idea of operating system that we are going to see now. Actually, this is the basis for anything that is built in operating system. So I have chosen this topic. And if you are very clear about this topic, then any further work that you have to do in operating system will be very easier to handle because you're very clear with all these concepts which you are going to see today. I hope I am audible to all of you. Am I audible?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. So just we will see the introduction, the definition of operating system, what it is doing actually, and then we'll move on to what is the topic for today's discussion. Today's topic is CPU scheduling, and that is the heart of any operating system. How it schedules and how it executes each process is the heart of any operating system. So before that, we will see what is the definition for an operating system and where it stands in the whole system as a computer, and then what is its activities you can see. So I just present to you a screen where it shows the definition of an operating system and what are its major functions. I'll present it now. Can you see? Can you see?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so this is the definition of an operating system. An operating system is a program that acts as an interface between the user and the computer hardware and controls the execution of all kinds of programs. So this is in a nutshell what's an operating system, and it stands for so many things. It's just 2 lines, but it stands for so many things. So as you see the diagram, the user is on the other end, and on the other end you have the hardware, and in between you have the operating systems, and you have different types of softwares, which is called as system software and application software. System software are the softwares which are dealing with the or handling the functions of the hardware. And application softwares are what you write. For example, your library management system, your ticket management, ticket reservation, etc. All these are application softwares. And how are application softwares different from system softwares? System softwares are necessary for running the system itself. All those are machine independent, whereas application softwares are for performing some purpose or some application that you want, that the users want. So system softwares are built for the handling of the system, for the operation of the system. For example, your compiler, assembler, your operating system itself is a system software. Okay, so all these are examples of system softwares. Assemblers, compilers, loaders, linkers, operating system, all these are examples of system softwares, and these system softwares are made to work by the operating system, which is again a system software. Okay, and why these system softwares have to work? They have to work in order to execute the application software that you are writing. I think I'm clear. So one end you have the users, the other end you have the hardware, in between you have the operating system, and this operating system is interacting directly with the system softwares in order to provide services to the user in the form of executing application softwares. Okay, so I'm clear. So operating systems handle the system software in such a way to provide services to the user in the form of application software. So that's what is in the middle. So this is what is called as an operating system. Any doubts? So you must be clear about what is an operating system, what it is doing. So now you see the following functions of the operating system, major functions. It manages the memory, it manages the processor, it manages all the devices. Then you have file management. Then you have security. Security is very, very important because if you don't have security, your whole purpose will be spoiled. Then you have control over the system performance. That means how fast it should go, and then job accounting, error detecting, coordination between other software and users. So all these are the major functions of the operating system, which it is doing by controlling the system software to provide services to the user who's on the other end. So it controls the hardware and software. What software? Your system software. It controls the system software and the hardware in such a way to provide services to the user. That's why you have this operating system in the center. Okay. So now we'll go. Actually, what is our topic today? It is CPU scheduling. So where does that come in all these functions? Can you say? Any one of you? Because you have started learning operating system already. You are midway through. I heard so that you are midway through. CPU scheduling, where does it come in these operations, functions that you have here? Memory management, processor management, device management, file management, security, control over system performance. So all these are here. Where does CPU scheduling that you're going to see now comes up? Which function is that? Can you hear me?
Process management.
Good, good. Process, another name for CPU is process management. CPU stands for? CPU stands for?
Central processing unit.
Yes, another name for processor is the central processing unit. So we are going to go into processor management, and one aspect of processor management and very, very important aspect of processor management is the CPU scheduling. So that we will see today. Okay. So I will go to the PPT where we have CPU scheduling. Since we have an idea about what is an operating system, directly we'll go on to CPU scheduling. Can you see?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I'll go to slideshow. You just stop me if you have any doubts. Okay, so the topic that we are going to see here is CPU scheduling. CPU stands for Central Processing Unit or Central Processor Unit. So what we are going to see here is as processes come up, as the operating system commands the system to do some work, that work comes in the form of processes. So all the units of work are called as processes here. So the command comes from the operating system to the system software and the hardware, and they have to be ready to do the work that the operating system is going to tell them. So because the operating system is an interface between the user and the hardware, and it manages the hardware using the system software. Okay, so as the operating system issues commands to the hardware using the system software, and those commands will come in the form of processes. That is, the work has to be done, will be coming in the form of processes, and those processes has to be executed by the processor. Now, what is the order in which the processor executes them? How it executes them? Does it execute them fully, or does it execute them only 50% and then go to the next process? Because there will be a lot of processes which are coming in one after the other, and the CPU has to manage. There will be only one processor in every system. This is the normal picture where you have a system and there will be only one processor. Okay, so this processor has to manage all the processes which are coming in. I hope you are clear about what is a process. A process is a unit of work that has been assigned to the processor. And who's assigning? Operating system. Operating system coordinates everything. So it says, go and do this work. That work comes up in the form of a process. And that process has to be executed by the processor. Without a processor, nothing will be done, except for I/O jobs, that is input-output, where the command goes from the operating system directly to the input-output device, except that other things come up. There are two kinds of jobs actually. One is called as I/O bound jobs and the other is called as CPU bound jobs. CPU bound jobs will be executed by the processor, whereas I/O bound jobs will be, whereas input output bound jobs will be carried out by the input output devices. Okay, so now we are talking about CPU bound jobs. So whenever something has to get executed, it will come to the processor in the form of a process, and this is being done by the operating system, because operating system issues commands for everything. So command from the operating system, CPU does the job. So if you see here, you have the basic concept, which we will see here. First three are the ones which we are going to see now. The basic things which are necessary for scheduling. What is scheduling after all? CPU, you know, central processing unit or central processor unit, as you call. And scheduling, we must have studied scheduling also, because that comes in the second unit actually. Have we completed the second unit? Students?
Yes, students, respond.
Have you studied CPU scheduling?
Yes, ma'am. Study.
Second unit is complete?
Yes, they are responding, ma'am. Yes.
Yes, okay. So I can ask you questions. Or rather, you can ask me questions because you have an idea about it already. Okay, so a little more stronger you can become in all these, because when you study it more than once, you get more clarity actually. Okay, so basic concepts we will study. Second one is scheduling criteria, and the third one is scheduling algorithms. So these are the three concepts which we are going to see today. Okay, scheduling, as I asked you, what is scheduling? Just now I asked you a question. What is scheduling? Scheduling?
Students, respond.
Procedures. Ma'am, it is a process of arranging or controlling, ma'am. Controlling work or data, or arranging process and stuff.
Or you know it, you're not ready to say?
Ma'am?
Yeah, please tell me. Go ahead.
Scheduling, it is a process of arranging or controlling work, ma'am, or workload during a process.
Okay. So scheduling is arranging the order in which an execution has to take place by the CPU. As you said, I'm telling it in different words, that's it. So the order in which the processes have to be executed is what is called as scheduling. And that will be taken up by the CPU. CPU scheduling is to which process the CPU has to be assigned at a time. This has to be decided. That's what is called as scheduling. In other words, the order in which the processes are to be executed by the CPU. That's what is called as CPU scheduling. Which process the CPU has to be given to at a time. That's called as CPU scheduling. That has to be decided. Why that has to be decided? Why can't you give any process at any time to the CPU? What will happen if you give like that? What will happen if you give any process at any time to the CPU? What will happen? Why there should be some scheduling? See, any work that we do as human beings, don't we schedule our work? First, we have to do this. Second, we have to do this. Third, we have to do this. Why is this scheduling necessary? To get maximum benefit. Okay, in lesser time, we'll be able to study more when we schedule our studying of the subjects. Okay, so that's how here also, to maximize the benefits from the processor, we have to do some scheduling. So that the idea behind scheduling is to maximize the benefits of the processor. Okay, so that's why we go for scheduling. So let's see the basic concepts first. So the objectives of what we are going to study today is see what is CPU scheduling and where it is necessary, why it is necessary. Then we have the scheduling algorithms. Then we have the criteria. What are the conditions to be satisfied in CPU scheduling? And the last one is, when will we get optimized result by using these algorithms? Am I clear? So here we are going to see what is CPU scheduling. I already told you where it is necessary, why it is necessary. Then what are the algorithms which are used for CPU scheduling? Then what is the conditions that we have to satisfy for CPU scheduling? And when will we get optimized result by using these algorithms? What is the meaning of optimized result? What is optimization? Any idea? Optimization? See, optimization is a criteria that it's a concept actually. We can call any result as optimized only when it satisfies three conditions. The three conditions are time, space, and complexity. The computational complexity. So you call it as time complexity, space complexity, and computational complexity. When these three complexities are minimum for any algorithm, then you call that algorithm as optimized algorithm. Can you get what I'm saying? In terms of time, I said time complexity, no? So my algorithm should complete the process at the minimum time. No other algorithm must have completed at the minimum at this time so far. Say, for example, my algorithm is completing the job in 5 seconds. And no other algorithm has so far completed the job in 5 seconds. That means in terms of time, my algorithm is the optimized. The second category that you see is space complexity, that is memory utilization. How much space I need to store the values when I'm executing a process or algorithm, whatever you call it as. So if the space requirement is minimum for my algorithm, then that is the optimized. So far, my algorithm has got the minimum space requirement. Then my algorithm is the optimized. That one is computation complexity, the number of computations that I perform in the process to complete the job. So when the number of computations that I do in my process is the minimum so far, then in that case, my algorithm is the optimized. So here we have so many scheduling algorithms. So when do I have my algorithm to be called the optimized, or when can my algorithm become an optimized algorithm for CPU scheduling? That's what is called as, what are the optimized criteria for selecting a particular CPU scheduling algorithm. Am I clear so far? Am I clear so
Yes.
far? Okay, good. Then the basic concepts. So the CPU, the general idea is that the CPU must not be kept idle at any point of time. That means the CPU must be busy doing the job all the time, something or other. So if that is the case, if the CPU has to be kept busy all the time or utilized to the maximum 100%, then in that case, it will be obtained only when multi-programming is present. What is multi-programming? When more than one process is present for execution at the same time, it is called as multi-programming. So first point, you see, maximum CPU utilization can be obtained only with multi-programming. Okay, so when more than one process is being ready to be executed at the same time, and the CPU has to be provided to all of them, then in that case it is called as multi-programming. But in general, if you see, the CPU can execute only one process at a time. Even though the scene is multi-programming, the CPU will be doing only one process at a time. So now, how come the CPU can be given to many processes at the same time? This is the question we can ask. So we will see how it is happening. Actually, when a job is getting, every program will be consisting of CPU-bound jobs and IO-bound jobs. So sometimes it will require the CPU, sometimes it will require the input-output device. So when this particular process is getting executed, a part of it may be CPU bound and another part of it may be IO bound. So the processor will execute the CPU bound jobs first, then it will wait for the IO for the rest of the job, the rest of the process. So that's why we have called here two types of burst, that is called as CPU burst and IO burst. What is CPU burst? The jobs that need the processor are called as CPU burst, and the time required for doing that is called as CPU burst. So you see, CPU IO burst cycle consists of process execution, consisting of a cycle of CPU execution and IO wait. So any process is a combination of CPU bound as well as IO bound. So processor will do the CPU bound part, and the input output devices will do the IO bound part. So when the processor has completed the CPU bound part, it is idle now. So what to do? Other half of the process has been given to the IO. So in the meantime, what is the processor doing? Nothing. So next process can be allotted to the CPU so that you get 100% utilization of the CPU without keeping the CPU idle. You understand what I'm saying? So when a process IO is being done, the next process can come into the processor and start its CPU bound jobs. So actually, the first process has not yet completed, but at the same time, the CPU is given to the second process. This is what is called as multi-programming. In any case, the CPU will be occupied with only one process at a time. It cannot do more than one process at a time, but the scheduling will be done in such a way that when one process is waiting for the IO, another process will come into the CPU, because when a process is waiting for the IO, it leaves the CPU. It doesn't mean that it has completed. It is not yet complete. Its CPU part is completed, but IO part is being done. So it goes into the IO. Now the CPU becomes empty because it has given the first process to the IO. So now the second process can come into the CPU. So is the idea clear? Even in multi-programming, the CPU will be occupied by only one process at a time. Okay? But it will be scheduled in such a way that when the first process is doing IO, the second process comes into the CPU to do the CPU part of that process. CPU job of that process. Is that clear? So here you see, if you see the diagram, the first CPU burst is nothing but the execution of the CPU bound job. The commands that are necessary for CPU bound job. That's called as CPU burst. Then wait for IO burst, IO bound jobs. Then if you are having an alternate of these two, IO and CPU, multiprogramming becomes very effective. That means when one process IO is being done, the next process CPU job will be done in the processor. So the CPU time will not be wasted actually, and that's a basic concept. You have to alternate between CPU burst and IO burst in such a way that CPU utilization is 100% during multiprogramming. Is that clear? Clear, ma?
Clear, ma'am.
Okay, good. So this is the diagram which shows that burst duration and frequency, which you just now saw. This idea is being shown in the form of a histogram. So you have frequency on one side and burst duration on the other side, and so you see the variation in the graph, how the burst duration happens along with the frequency. Okay, so if you have understood this, the graph will be clear. So the main idea is keep the CPU utilization 100% in, and this will happen only in multiprogramming. What is multiprogramming? More than one process ready to get executed by the CPU. In that case, more than one process are waiting for the processor. All these processes has to be executed by the CPU by alternating between the CPU burst and IO burst. And this is how you can keep the CPU 100% utilized all the time. So that's how CPU burst times, CPU, it's constant, you see. The frequency is constant across burst duration. The frequency is, what is this actually?
Ma'am, the graph is not appearing, ma'am. We are in slide 1 itself.
Okay, okay. Now can you see? Has it changed? Has it changed? Can you see the change?
No, ma'am. No.
Okay, okay. I'll share it once again. Okay, I'll share it once again. Okay, I'll share it. Wait a minute. Now can you see?
Yes, ma'am. Now we
Can you
can
see now? Okay, okay, okay. Can you see?
Yeah, ma'am.
Can you see?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. So now this slide is clear. This slide is clear. Alternate between IO and CPU jobs. Now look at the graph.
Yeah,
You can
ma'am.
identify. Yeah. So burst duration on one side. Burst is CPU burst, and the frequency on one side. So and if the burst duration is very less, that is CPU being occupied is less, the frequency number of times it is happening is more. But when the burst duration is large, that means CPU occupied maximum amount of time. That's what is called as burst duration large. When the CPU is occupied maximum to the maximum, that is, it is not idle. So that you see as the CPU occupied time is more, the frequency becomes less. Almost it's a constant, you see. Okay, so when the CPU is occupied for less number of times, less amount of time, the frequency is more. But when the CPU is occupied for more number of time, the frequency is a constant. So this shows that the frequency of switching between CPU and other CPU jobs, that is processes, the shifting becomes less when the CPU is occupied for more number of times. That's what is called as its frequency. Is that clear? Clear?
Clear, ma'am.
Our idea is to keep the CPU utilized maximum number of time. That's it. Why should we keep it occupied all the time? To attain maximum benefits. Because if it is empty for some time, then we are not making full use of the facility given to us. So we have to keep the CPU occupied all the time. That is our first and foremost objective. So that's what is shown in this diagram. Okay, CPU scheduler. So here you see when the CPU scheduler, when the CPU becomes idle, it should not be kept idle. In that case, we have to give some process to the CPU to be executed, and that will be done by the CPU scheduler. Okay, so there are different states of the process. You must have studied ready state, waiting state, termination state, all these states, running state. So from these states, we have taken 4 states, switching from 4 states, which are given here, switching from running state to waiting state, running state to ready state, waiting state to ready state, and termination. So which process should go into the CPU next? That is the job of the CPU scheduler. CPU scheduler decides which process to be given to the CPU when the CPU becomes idle, so that we don't waste CPU time. So depending upon these 4 conditions, the CPU scheduling decisions will be taken. So you can switch from running state to waiting state, you can switch from running state to ready state, waiting state to ready state, and last one is terminates. Now you have 2 conditions which are called as preemptive scheduling and non-preemptive scheduling. Have you heard of it? Preemptive and non-preemptive? Preemptive and non-preemptive? No idea? No? Yes or no?
No,
If you
ma'am.
don't know, you know? You know or you don't know? Let it be anything. Just give me an answer. I will explain. No problem. You don't know?
Students respond, ma.
We don't know, ma'am.
You don't know. Good. It's okay. No problem. So here, are you clear about what is the running state, waiting state, ready state, termination? Shall I tell you what are those states? Now there are 5 states of the process that you must have studied already. Running state, ready state, waiting state, termination. Running state is the execution state. Waiting state is either it waits for the processor or waits for the IO. Ready state is ready for the processor to be given to it. Waiting state is waiting for IO. Okay. Running state means it is inside the processor. Waiting state means it is waiting for the IO after finishing the processor's job. Then ready state is waiting for the processor. Waiting state is waiting for IO. Ready state is waiting for the processor. Okay. Waiting stage, from waiting stage to ready state. Waiting state, I already said, it is waiting for IO. Once the IO is complete, it comes to the ready state once again to wait for the processor. Termination is all the things are over. Okay. Now, when will switching take place? See, for situations 1 and 4, there is no choice in terms of scheduling. A new process must be selected for execution. Why? Because, see, first one says switching from running state to waiting state. See, I'm making things clear. You know, overall, broad, there are so many algorithms, but when will those algorithms come into the picture? You have to be very clear. So, running state to ready state. Running state means it is using the processor. In the processor it is. Now it has finished the CPU bound job. As I said earlier, there are 2 kinds of jobs, CPU bound and IO bound job. So CPU bound job will be executed in the processor and IO jobs will be executed in the IO. Okay. So now when the CPU job is completed, that means the running state is over, it is switching to the waiting stage. Why? Because it needs an IO job to be done. So that's what is called as switching from running state to waiting state. In this case, first one and the last one, when the process terminates, you have to go and find out a new job to be given to the processor. Am I clear? 1 and 4. Whereas in the second one, you see from the running state to ready state. That means it is in the processor. Okay. Now only a part of the CPU job is over, but still it has to leave the processor. So it is leaving the processor and going to the ready state. Ready state means again it is waiting for the processor. Okay. Ready state means waiting for the processor. Waiting stage means is waiting for IO. Okay. Am I clear? So running state is in the processor. It is in the processor. Now by something happening, it is not able to continue in the processor. Okay, and it is going to the ready state where it has to wait for the processor once again. Whereas the third one you see, waiting state to ready state, it has completed its IO because it was in the waiting state means it is going to the IO, as I said in the first option. So in the waiting state, it is waiting for the IO and it has completed the IO, so it is coming to the ready state. Okay, ready state means waiting for the processor. Now 1 and 4, you see some other process has to come into the processor in 1 and 4 because one running state is going to the IO, waiting for IO. In that case, the CPU becomes empty. In the last case, when the process terminates, also the CPU becomes empty. So in these two cases, some other process must be scheduled for the processor. Am I clear? Now in the second and third, you see, when it is running itself, it is abruptly stopped in between. When a process is running, it is abruptly stopped in between and it is made to go to the ready state. That's what is called as running to ready state. Okay, and here waiting state to ready state. When IO is completed, again it goes to the ready state. Now what is the ready state? Ready state is the state where the process waits for the processor. Okay, so when it is process is empty, it will go into the processor. That's what is called as ready state. Now in 2 and 3, something is happening. There is a choice, however, for situations 2 and 3. So we will see what is that. The next slide. So you see, in 1 and 4, what is happening? First, whichever process was in the processor, that processor is no more going to go into the processor once again. Some new process has to go into. So what is non-preemptive scheduling and preemptive scheduling? Before going into the details, I'll tell you this. Preemptive scheduling means when I am doing a job, I am stopped in between. I'm not completing the job. I'm not completing the job. I'm halfway through or 75% through. In that stage, I'm made to stop. And the processor is given to some other job. That's what is called as preemptive. I'm able to stop a job in between, even though it has not completed, and the process is given to some other, a processor is given to some other process. This is called as preemptive. Whereas non-preemptive says that when a process is given to a processor, the process completes and then only the processor is given to the next process. In between stopping is not allowed. That's called as non-preemptive. Are you clear what I'm telling you? Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Non-preemptive means I'm allowed to complete my job fully. Then only the processor will be given to the next process. Whereas in preemptive, even though I don't complete, I will be stopped in between and the processor will be given to another job. That's called as preemptive scheduling. Now, in these 4 cases, which 2 is non-preemptive and which 2 is preemptive? Can you identify? There are 4 cases here, isn't it? 1, 2, 3, 4. Which is preemptive and which is non-preemptive? Going from running state to waiting state, the CPU becomes empty. First one. Going from running state to waiting state. Waiting means I said IO. It is going for IO. So CPU job is complete. Can I give the processor to some other job because my CPU part is over? Can I give? My CPU part is over and I'm going for my IO job. So the CPU is empty now. So I can give it. This is called as non-preemptive or preemptive? Non-preemptive. Because my CPU part is over, I don't need the CPU anymore. I'm going for my IO job. So I can give it to another process. So that's called as non-preemptive. I'm finishing the job and giving the process to the next job. Okay. So similarly, the fourth one, if you see, when a process terminates, it has completed all its jobs. So now the processor can be given to a next job. So 1 and 4 are non-preemptive, whereas 2 and 3 are preemptive. Okay. So what happens in 2? When it is in the running state, you're stopping it abruptly and making it go to the ready stage. So that means it is preemptive. It has been stopped in between. It has not completed its job. Okay. And similarly for third one, switching from waiting state to ready state. Waiting, IO is complete. Now I want the processor. Okay. So already I'm halfway through. I've completed my CPU part. Now I finished my IO part also. Still I need the processor some more time. So I need to go to the ready state. So in 2 and 3 are preemptive, whereas 1 and 4 are non-preemptive. Here you see, when scheduling takes place under circumstances 1 and 4, it is called as non-preemptive. See, what is non-preemptive? Once the CPU has been allotted to a process, the process keeps the CPU until it releases the CPU, either by terminating or by switching to the waiting stage. Is that clear? CPU is allocated to a process, it will complete and then only leave. If it is not completing and made to leave, it is called as preemptive. Is that clear? Clear, students? Shall I go to the next slide? Shall I go to the next slide?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So preemptive. Here you see 2 and 3 are preemptive. Why preemptive? Because they were made to stop in between without completing the job. CPU bound job. Okay. So 2 and 3 are preemptive. Preemptive scheduling can result in race conditions. What is race condition? Here you see, that's a very, very important question in all the question papers. Race condition. They will ask you in 2 marks, 3 marks, what is the race condition? Give an example. So what's a race condition? When two processes are sharing the same data, say for example, A is equal to 5. My process 1 is changing the data from A is equal to 5 to A is equal to 7. Okay. Now what happened to, and it has not completed the process. It is still in the CPU. Suddenly it is being pulled from the CPU and process 2 is allowed to go into it. Process 2 also is sharing the same data, A is equal to 5. Now what will be the value of A with respect to process 1 and with respect to process 2? Can you tell me what will be the value of A? The value of A is 5 before any process entering the CPU. But there are two processes, process 1 and process 2, which are sharing the data A is equal to 5. The value of A is 5. Now when process 1 goes into the CPU, it changes the value of A from 5 to 7. But it has not saved it because it is just, it is going on with the process. But suddenly P1, process 1 is pulled out from the processor and process 2 is made to go into the processor. Now, what will be the value of A for process 1 and process 2? My question is clear? The value of A for process 1 is what? Process 1 is pulled out suddenly from the processor when it was executing. So this is what is called as preemptive scheduling. You are not able to complete. Before completing, you are pulled out from the processor. So process 1 is pulled out from the processor. Now process 2 comes in. Both are sharing the value of A. That means they are doing some manipulations on A. So what will be the value of A for process 1? It is 7 because it changed 5 to 7. But what will be the what will be the value of A for process 2? It will be still 5. So there is, what happens? Same value of A should be given to both, isn't it? But actually the value of A for process 1 is 7 and the process, so inconsistency comes up. The value of A is 5 for P2 and A is 7 for P1. This is not allowed. Actually the same value, same variable is being shared, value of the variable should be the same for both. But actually what happens is, because of preemptive scheduling, suddenly pulling out of the process from the processor, what happens is inconsistency happens. Inconsistency stands for saying that the shared value is not the same for both the processes. This should not happen. Okay? And in the same way, it affects preemption, affects the kernel mode also. What is kernel mode? The most important operations of the operating system. The most important functions of the operating system will be done in the kernel. So when you are executing such operations, such functions, and preemption happens, what will happen? You're not completing the job what you are supposed to do. So the functions of the operating system will become inconsistent. Okay, so that is the disadvantage of preemption. You're allowed to remove a job from the processor by force, but when you do that, these are the results that will happen. Inconsistency happens, and the operating system functions become inconsistent because of preemption. So when you're doing some crucial jobs, very critical jobs, you must be allowed to complete without any problem. Okay? If you are not allowed to complete without any problem, then again inconsistency happens and the job will not be done correctly and fully. So examples of operating systems which use preemptive scheduling are Windows, Mac OS, Linux, Unix, etc. So these are the advantages and disadvantages of preemptive and non-preemptive. Very important question again, like race condition, preemptive and non-preemptive are very important questions. Is that clear? Preemptive and non-preemptive? Just give me an answer, yes or no. That's all. Yes? Students, can you hear me? Sangeeta ma'am?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
But students are not answering. Is there any problem for them?
Nothing like
Shall
that.
I continue? Shall I continue?
Yeah, ma'am.
Yeah, okay. So next one is dispatch latency. That is the time taken for the dispatcher, taking for switching when one process stops and another process starts. The time taken between stopping one process and starting another process is called as dispatch latency. Now, dispatch latency must be high or low. It must be less actually. Latency is the time taken for doing something. And anyway, the latency must be less. So here also, dispatch latency, which is the time taken for stopping one process and starting another process. So what is PCB here? Process control block. It is for saving the state of the process. For every process, you will have one PCB, process control block. And whatever is the current state of the process, it will go into the PCB. So when you're stopping one process, what happens? The state of the process will get saved. Then when you start another process, you actually go into the PCB of the second process, see the current status, and then start from there for the second process. This is what is called as dispatch latency. Okay, and this is done by the dispatcher, where it gives the control of the CPU to the process selected for getting executed by the CPU, and that is being done by the CPU scheduler. Okay, so dispatcher, it gives control of the CPU to the selected process by the CPU scheduler. And the time taken to switch from one process to another is called as dispatch latency. What actually happens when switching is saving the state of the current process and going into the current state of the next process and starting from there to execute. That is called as dispatch latency. The time taken for doing that is called as dispatch latency. Okay. Scheduling criteria, the most important part. What are the characteristics you expect from scheduling? When will scheduling be most effective? What are the criteria you have to take into account for doing scheduling? CPU utilization, throughput, turnaround time, waiting time, response time. CPU utilization, the amount of time that the CPU is busy. Throughput, the number of processes that are able to complete their job per unit time. It may be per second, per minute, whatever it is, per unit time. Then turnaround time, the amount of time taken to execute a particular process. Waiting time, the amount of time it has been waiting in the ready queue. Response time, the amount of time it takes from when you submit a request until you get the first response. See, response time is little tricky. You don't have to see the time until you get the whole output. First response of the output you get, that will be the time you have to note. So time taken from when a request was submitted and until you get the first response of the output, not the whole output. So that's what is called as response time. So when will these be optimum? As I said earlier, when the CPU utilization is maximum. No algorithm has got so much maximum utilization of the CPU. Maximum throughput, the number of processes executed per unit time by the CPU. The minimum turnaround time. The time taken to execute a process must be minimum. Then waiting time, the amount of time it has been waiting for the CPU, that should be minimum. Then response time also should be minimum. So CPU utilization should be maximum. Throughput should be maximum. Throughput is an important question again. So all these, turnaround time, waiting time, response time, all of them are 2 marks questions actually. So maximum throughput, the number of processes executed per unit time by the CPU, that should be maximum. Minimum turnaround time, the amount of time taken by the process to complete its execution. Then minimum waiting time, the amount of time it has waited in the ready queue for the processor, that should be minimum. Then response time, the amount of time taken from the time this request was given until the first response, that also should be minimum. So all these should be satisfied if you have to have an optimized scheduling algorithm. Okay, so these are the 5 important scheduling algorithms. You can see first come, first serve, shortest job first. All this you know already, but 1 or 2 points which will be extra for you, that will be an added information. So first come, first serve, shortest job first scheduling, round robin scheduling, priority scheduling, multi-level queue scheduling. So far it's clear. So we will go into the algorithms fast and finish. So all the basics are clear. Basics are clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Good. Okay. So now first come, first serve. So you see there's an example given here. Burst time is the amount of time taken by the process to complete its execution in the CPU. Am I clear? Burst time is the time taken by a process to complete its execution in the CPU. So that's what is this 24, 3 and 3 for P1, P2, P3. Okay, so this kind of chart is called as a Gantt chart, where you put in the processes as they are executed in a particular order. So as you see the process, it's P1, P2, P3, the same order you have to execute. So first process takes up 0 to 24, second process P2 comes in at 24 and takes 3 as the burst time. Then you have 27. From 27, P3 comes up and up to 30 because burst time is 3 for P3. So here you see how you calculate the waiting time. How should be the waiting time? Minimum or maximum? Waiting time should be? Waiting time should be? Maximum? When will it become an optimized algorithm? Waiting time should be minimum. So when you compare 2 or 3, 4 algorithms together, whichever has the waiting time minimum, that will be called as the optimized. So here it is 27. When you compare it with the other algorithms that you're going to study, you will know which one is the optimized. Okay, so here it has 27. How did you get 27? From 0, waiting time for P1. P1 entered at 0, it didn't wait for the processor. As soon as it came, the processor was given. So waiting time for P1 is 0, but P2 waited for 24 because up to 24 P1 was executed. As I said, not more than one process will be executed by a processor, even in a multi-programmed environment. Okay, so here P2 comes in at 24 because P1 has used the CPU till 24. So P2 has waited for 24. Again, P3 came in at 27 and it has waited up to 27. So altogether, you add up and divide by 3, you get 17 as the average waiting time. Okay, now there is a problem here in this FCFS, which you call as Conway effect, which is again an important question. Conway effect, if you see the previous one, the longest job was given first, P1. See, that happens to be 24 as the burst time. But P2 is 3 and P3 is 3. If you see the order in which they executed, P1 is the longest job. It has executed first, which means that P2 and P3 were waiting for a long time because after P1 executing only, P2 can get into the processor. This is what is happening here. Now, that's what is called as Conway effect. Because the first job or process was a longer one, the shorter process behind had to wait a long time. That's what is called as Conway effect. And that can be avoided if you go for this kind of scheduling where P2 is given first, you see, 3, and P3 again 3, 6, completed. Then after 6, P1 is given up to 30. So the order is changed, P2, P3, P1. What happens? See the average waiting time, it is only 3. The same kind, what happened in the previous slide, the average waiting time was 17 because P1 went in first, which was a longer process. So this is what is called as Conway effect. When a shorter process comes behind a longer process, Conway effect happens. What is Conway effect? Hello? 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 Okay, we'll go on fast. Can you hear me? And finish off. Students, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, okay. So second one, shortest job first. You see, whichever has the shortest, this already you know, so I'm going to go fast. You just see all these things. So which is the shortest here? P4 is the shortest. So that will go in first. Then you have P1 second. Then you have P3. Then you have P2. So you have average waiting time to be 7. So this is shortest job first. Whichever is having the burst time as the least one, that will go first. Second least will go in second, and so on. So that's shortest job first. Okay. And remaining shortest remaining time first. That again, this is also called as preemptive version of SJF. Okay. So do you know this shortest remaining first time first? I will go fast because the basics are necessary. Here, all these things you must have studied already. So when you link the basics with these, it will be a little more clear. Okay, here shortest remaining first time first stands for saying that you have the arrival time as an extra attribute here, which is 0, 1, 2, 3. What order they arrived in. So according to the order, P1 comes in. So 1 unit of P1 has got executed. Is there any doubt in shortest remaining time first? You have already studied, no? If you have any doubts, you can ask me in this. Otherwise, I will proceed fast. Any doubts in this? Students, any doubts? Average waiting time for this alone, I will tell you. Just see this. Give me an answer, otherwise I will continue. If you're, huh? Can you, are you clear with this calculation, how you get the average waiting time for this? Because this is little complex. This shortest remaining time first. Shall I continue or you want me to explain this? Students, just one student give me a reply.
Continue, ma'am.
Continue? You are able to understand? Okay. Okay. Round robin again. Round robin is preemptive or non-preemptive? If you give me an answer to this, I will know whether you have understood or not. Round robin is preemptive or non-preemptive? Anybody? Preemptive, non-preemptive? Round robin? Okay, round robin is preemptive. That means if there are 5 processes and if the time quantum assigned is 5, first 5 will be given to the first process. Even if the first process does not complete, it will go to the second. So a time quantum, a constant time quantum is assigned for each process. Even if the process completes or not completes, it will be pulled out from the processor, forced to be moved out of the processor, and that is what is called as round robin. And it will be given to the next process. Again, the next process will be given the same time quantum. And the next, again, the third process will be given for the same time quantum. Like this, it goes in a cycle until all the process completes. It's what is called as round robin. In the case when the time quantum is large, it is called as FIFO. When it is small, time quantum, switching happens often and the overhead becomes high. Okay, so this is the example of RR, where the time quantum is 4, each process is given 4. Even if they don't complete, it will be forced to move out of the processor. That's why it is called as preemptive. Okay. So depending upon the time quantum, your round robin becomes effective or not effective. How much you choose as the time quantum, it depends. In priority scheduling, a priority number is assigned to each process. And according to the priority, it will be given the processor. That's what is called as priority scheduling. There are 2 important concepts which is called as starvation and aging. Starvation is low priority process will not be given the processor, that's starvation. Aging is as time progresses, low priority process become high priority process. This is called as aging. Okay, so here you see, according to the priority, it is given the processor. Average waiting time is 8.2. Now, when you combine, when will the combination of priority scheduling and RR happen? When two processes have the same priority in RR. Okay, in priority scheduling, when 2 processes have the same priority, then for those 2 processes, RR will be done. Here you see, for example, P4 is the first priority, so P4 is executed. Next, you see P3 and P2, or both of them have the second priority. So they are executed in round robin fashion until they complete. Then after that, P4 and P5, P1 and P5 have third priority. P1 and P5 are executed one after the other in round robin. Okay. Okay. So now multi-level queue. You can put the processes in the form of queues. All the foreground processes in one queue and background processes in another queue. Okay, so what is a multi-level queue you see? If all of them belong to one priority, you can put them in one queue. Second priority, third priority, fourth, and so on. Okay, so this is a multi-level queue. Similarly, you can have low priority jobs in the last queue and high priority in the top queue. Okay. Here, this you can see there are 3 queues. This is the last multi-level feedback queue. So you have Q0, Q1, Q2, 3 queues. So first, when it enters Q0, if it is not able to complete the job, it goes into Q2. Again, in Q2, if it is not able to complete the job, it goes to the third one. So like this, you can move the jobs depending upon the priority or depending upon the time it requires to finish. So that is the end. So we have studied about all the different. Any questions which you have in particular? Because now you have studied twice. You have studied it there and also here. Any questions, students? No questions?
No, ma'am.
Okay, then we shall finish. Thank you so much for your patient listening.
Thank you, ma'am.
Sangeeta madam, just 1 minute. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Good morning, Jayanti ma'am.
Good morning, ma'am. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation. Such a wonderful session. It's really very useful for our students, ma'am. Amid your busy schedule, I know very well you have a lot of work and commitment. Even you're having valuation schedule also. After this, you have to go to university. So amid of all these circumstances, you have accepted our invitation. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you so
Okay,
much.
Okay, ma'am. Sangeeta, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Um, please give a vote of thanks.
Yeah, ma'am. Yeah, ma'am. Thank you, madam, for sharing an inspiring learning experience. It was such a wonderful, brilliant session, an informative session, and knowledge sharing with our students on operating system concepts. And the guest lecture was very well designed, and it is very valuable for all the faculty as well as students, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
For the time, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you all the faculty members. Thank you HOD ma'am and
Okay.
thank you Sangeeta ma'am. Thank you
ma'am.
for this opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Second year students, please leave because first years are going to join in this. Second year students, leave the session. Good morning, students.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, ma'am.
Morning, ma'am.
Can you able to see?
Yes, ma'am.
So we are left with the topic array of strings. So till now, what we were storing in the array in our previous example?
Integers, ma'am.
Integers.
Characters. File.
1 minute now. I will just close and I'll come out. It's showing record.